Good morning, and welcome to today's webinar discussing the value of coordinated multi-channel marketing for mid-market retailers. I'm Alyssa Prettyman, Creative and Account Director with Scratch Marketing and Media, and I'll host for today's event. I want to take a few minutes to go over some timing and logistics of today's webinar. First off, the formal presentation will run about 35 to 40 minutes. Afterwards, we'll have some time for Q&A, so if you have any questions, please use the Q&A tool in the On24 webinar platform, and we'll try to cover those as best as possible. If we are unable to get to your question during the Q&A session, we will follow up with you separately post-webinar. Let's review some of the webinar functionality. We will have the presentation located within the folder widget at the bottom, along with a few links to other resources. There is also an email widget at the bottom where you can send an email and invite a colleague if you'd like. The webinar is being recorded and will be available about 2 hours after the webinar has ended. So if you would like a copy, if you need to bow out early or would like to send it to a colleague who couldn't make it, it will be on demand following the registration link for access at any time. Let's take a second and introduce today's speakers. We have a terrific panel with us today discussing the value of coordinated multi-channel marketing for mid-market retailers. We have David Daniels, who is the CEO and founder of the Relevancy Group and is responsible for the research and analysis of today's webinar. David launched the Relevancy Group in January 2010, shortly after he left his role as Vice President and Principal Analyst at Forrester Research. Prior to Forrester's acquisition of Jupiter Research in 2008, David served as the lead email marketing analyst and ultimately as Vice President and Research Director for almost a decade. In this role, David ran Jupiter's operations and industry analyst teams, which represented 1/3 of the Jupiter Research business. David was the first analyst to cover the email service provider sector and coined the phrase ESP. It's only fitting that the online marketing analyst, David, started marketing on the commercial internet in 1988. Also on the call, we have Paul Mandeville from QuickPivot. Paul Mandeville brings over 15 years of marketing application technology experience to QuickPivot, serving as QuickPivot's Chief Product Officer and leading the company's efforts in product strategy, innovation, and design. Paul's design and development work to date resulted in 2 QuickPivot patent filings, a 2015 Stevie Silver and People's Choice Award, and a 2014 MyTex Award for Best Innovation in Marketing Automation Technology. Prior to joining QuickPivot, Paul served as Chief Operating Officer and was part of the founding management team at Conversion, a cross-channel marketing technology company located outside of Boston. Under his leadership, Conversion delivered 5 years of profits, 500% revenue growth, and notched a spot in Inc. magazine's 2011 fastest-growing privately held companies. Paul's passion for emerging technology has led him to serve on advisory boards of several portfolio companies in the Slater Technology Fund, a business incubator investment fund that focuses on seed funding for innovative startups in his home state of Rhode Island. So without further ado, let me introduce our primary speaker for the event, David Daniels. David, take it away.
Thank you, Alyssa, and thank you all for joining us today. It's a pleasure to be here along with Paul and present this really, I think, very interesting research. We're going to be talking about a study paper that will be available for download for you to really read and digest on your own. But it's a study that we did in the spring of 2015 with QuickPivot, and we focused on marketing organizations classified as mid-market. They employ between 100 and 1,000 people and operate really exclusively in the United States. The findings highlight that email marketing really remains the most effective channel. And I'm going to start really with begin with the end in mind really here, and that in the report we found the results to be just really remarkable. When we started to look at marketers, these mid-market email marketers, that were utilizing not just email but connecting it in a multi-channel way. Right? So they were coordinating their email campaigns with their print and other channels, such as online display and social, but they were coordinating the messaging and marketing so that their customers were getting the same messages. So you can see here in this first slide, those that were doing this connected multi-channel marketing were nearly twice as effective in driving revenue as those marketers that were really not connected or not coordinated at all. And what this model is based on is, in our survey, we asked people about their tactics, and we put them into basically these two segments based on those tactics. We also, in the survey, asked people about their performance rates, so their inbox delivery rate, click rate, open rate, so on and so forth, all the way down to conversion. And so that's where we know these are real results. We applied that to a standard, what we found to be the average monthly send size for these senders, which was 16.5 million messages. And we applied those performance results, again, delivery, open, click, and conversion, and average order value to those two distinct segments. And that's how you get these results. So, pretty staggering here. Lots of revenue opportunity for people that are doing things in a coordinated fashion. Now, even without looking at the segment that are sophisticated, overall, when we asked these mid-market marketers about their revenue attribution with email and online marketing. So marketers acknowledge that email marketing revenue accounts for more of their revenue than other online marketing channels, including social, display, and their own website. When we asked about the channel effectiveness, marketers stated that email marketing was more effective than other channels. In fact, 88% of mid-market marketers surveyed by us stated that their email marketing was somewhat or highly effective channel in terms of driving email revenue results for their business. So, there's a high degree of satisfaction, certainly, because as you can see here, in particularly, I think it's in that where it leapfrogs is in that 20 to 21 to 29%. There's a massive difference there between what's going on just with their online marketing and with the email marketing. That's where email really seems to stand out and have gains on that. So it's not surprising that, again, we see this is the 88% of marketers that I was just alluding to that said, yeah, we're highly satisfied with email because it's in fact driving revenue. But well-coordinated marketers, as we've seen already, generally leverage cross-channel attribution modeling to better understand the impact of the customer interaction across channels and use that information to optimize their integrated programs. We found, however, that there were only about 12% of mid-market marketers that were leveraging cross-channel attribution techniques. So herein lies a great opportunity. So even though most marketers here are saying, yeah, email, we feel really satisfied. We feel it's effective, but it's sort of like my golf swing sometimes. It feels good, right? I think it's pretty good, but actually it's probably not. So in this case here, with only 12% of marketers understanding the attribution or practicing attribution across all these channels, it's a little fuzzy here. I think people, particularly I think with social. Social is so easy to do. There's such a low barrier to entry, but it's not necessarily being measured in coordination with email marketing in terms of revenue attribution. So there's a huge opportunity that exists for marketers to better understand and leverage the data that's available to them. Now, what's fascinating to me in this study is that email, obviously very, very cost-effective, has a higher return. The Direct Marketing Association always talks about a stat that for every dollar you spend on email, it's about $44 in return. But what we're seeing is, in this fascinating part, is this resurgence in print and direct marketing, right? So while email remains the most widely utilized channel, print is number 2 here for mid-market retailers. Marketers continue to cling to direct mail because it's a mature channel, obviously, and it's a great follow-up. It drives steady return on investment, and budgets for direct mail are once again on the rise. So we're seeing, though, the challenge again is the risk of inundating consumers with clutter in an uncoordinated and potentially irrelevant way. So if you start to think about some of the brands that really do this well across channel, the coordination, I always think of Apple, right? Apple's a really good example of a brand that delivers a consistent marketing and really a consistent experience everywhere you go, from the moment even you open up a product to going to their store, certainly their TV, their online advertising. It has the same look and feel. It has the same sort of unified customer experience that is necessary to really driving a coordinated marketing organization. We'll talk about the marketing organization in just a moment here. But again, take a moment and look at this data, right? Email marketing, 48% of marketers are utilizing that channel. With print right behind it, well in advance of things like paid search marketing, right? Or even mobile marketing or online marketing via YouTube. So it's things such as commercials and video online. So again, really interesting to see print making a comeback in some ways here. Again, we find it to be really effective when those two things are coordinated. So let's talk about some of the challenges, though, and it starts with the organization is one of them. Most marketing organizations are comprised, obviously, of stakeholders, but these stakeholders are not really well aligned. In fact, just 36% of marketers here surveyed stated that their marketing department shares common goals, right? So it's a bit of a wild west out there. And this is in part sort of due to the traditional tribal nature of marketing, in that each channel requires specific domain expertise and knowledge, and people are somewhat protective of those domains. You know, the social person does the social thing, and the print person. There's not a lot of coordination. Certainly the data here suggests that there's tremendous room for opportunity to get people really rowing in the same direction. One of the recommendations we would potentially suggest is looking at how people are compensated or rewarded. So you'll notice here down at the bottom there's only about 18% here that have about the same measures in place to determine success, right? Or those people that are practicing attribution across channels, again here, very low. So, but if we had some compensation or merit awards or those goals where the whole team shared in the reward, then I think we'd have more people sort of rowing in that same direction, to turn a phrase. But these challenges really underscore the need for attribution services and measurement technology, and implementing those tactics is a way to break down these marketing silos, and really allow people to look at the big picture. And so there's a tremendous opportunity here to bring more measurement to the table, to allow the marketing organization to more effectively operate. So when we've asked marketers about their goals and their aspirations for 2015, we think they're correctly aligned, at least when we look at where we think the market's headed. And so they're self-aware of those challenges that we just saw on the previous slide, and they understand that they need to implement additional data and relevancy and measurement to make their marketing efforts work better. So 1/3 here are saying that we need to use analytics in a much greater way to optimize our communications, improving response attribution across multiple channels. So it's really, the results are really reading like the playbook of the tactics that we're suggesting here. And even to the point of implementing predictive recommendations and doing some data science. So it's all about improving the relevancy of the communications and targeting those customers both online and offline to improve segmentation and targeting. But it's easy to say these things, right? It's easy to sign up to the gym and say I'm going to use that membership, but it's another thing to actually apply them. So it's necessary to have an appropriate partner that you can leverage the tools and the technology within the organization. So we've started to definitely see a shift in technology availability occur in the last 5 years, right? It used to be automation and coordination were massive database design, build out, and very expensive and highly specialized software. But today there thankfully are many solutions that have open APIs where you can centralize your data and do so in a much more efficient manner, a cost-effective manner. And the technical talent, especially in the mid-market sector, is a sizable challenge. So the solutions that enable a true coordination and integration can be achieved quicker and a fraction of the cost these days than in the past. But people are important, right? Technology can only solve for a portion of this. So there's a great wave of young and upcoming talent, certainly within the millennial demographic, and the people that sort of learn to scroll before they could write. And we see that individuals agencies have about 3 to 5 years of experience within the digital domain. And so it's a necessary part as we start to talk about the tactics of how you begin to coordinate this stuff is to have the right people, not just the right technology, but both in place. So the need for services and resources is definitely a focus to optimize multi-channel marketing and improve and optimize these programs. So because, again, this slide, I think, highlights the need that for services and technology, because the tactics that we know have been proven to work remain sort of low. So things like just leveraging your transactional emails, your order confirmations, and things of that nature, to use them for marketing purposes. And there are guidelines around that about how much marketing can be in those messages, given the Canned Spam Act here in the United States. But again, not even quite a third of marketers are doing that. Things like testing, utilizing A/B testing, which is really the cornerstone of any direct marketing program, whether that be print direct or online. Again, it's really rather anemic. Less than a quarter of marketers are doing testing, and that's in part because it implies that we need more people. I need more content. It's going to take more time to do those things. There's rework involved in that process. So you can see that many people are not using these sort of proven tactics, and enlisting tactics such as testing and targeting based on online behaviors such as browse abandoned or some sort of triggered lifecycle marketing across channels definitely drives revenue. And that was one of those sort of characteristics or tactics that we used at the beginning, that model that I showed you at the start of this presentation, where we looked at the tactics that people were using. Testing was definitely one of them, as well as coordination. So 23% of marketers here cite the coordination of marketing across departments. 20% cite coordination of strategy. So again, these are the people that, they're in the minority, but they're definitely driving more revenue. Budget, staff, and focus. 18% lack budget and the appropriate staff. So again, you've got to figure out how can I get more budget. I think one of the things that marketers can do, we talk a little bit about this in the research, is to understand the value of your email subscribers. That number is going to be much higher likely than other channels, that typically we find it is. And that's, if you don't know the value of your email address, that's your currency to go and get more budget, to get more staff, and to do things like data integration, right? Only 18% here cite the lack of integrated data to another from systems. So there's a challenge even just moving the data from their internal system to their email service provider. So again, those things can be solved with technology. So one of the things we find that is really growing is the utilization of real-time data, and we think that's properly prioritized against all of the things that marketers can do or perhaps need to do. Using real-time data is actually more accessible sometimes to marketers today and easier for them to act on versus the static data that is collected from marketers over time. For example, if you used adaptive content based on a subscriber's mobile device versus appending demographic data to existing customer segments, so you'd have to go out to a third-party vendor potentially and grab that demographic data, that can be more laborious than utilizing that real-time information. So I know this person has just opened the email, and it is an Apple device versus a Samsung device, so I can format the content appropriately. And so that's one utilization of real-time data. It could be changing the offer based on location of that user, or that subscriber, I should say. But there's tremendous opportunity here, and if you look at the current practices, it's really, I believe, those things at the top are truly competitive differentiation, right, where people are measuring the lifetime value. They know the value of that email address, as I previously mentioned. Really important to know that because that's going to be your currency. They're utilizing things such as predictive analytics, and they have at least a segmentation scheme for their customer and prospecting marketing data. There's certainly room for growth in some of these other areas where people are potentially need to centralize their data, and by that I'm not necessarily saying move all the data into one new data store, but again, the ability to centralize it through APIs and integration of other sorts. And then for most marketers, it seems out of reach for things like utilizing data hygiene and deduplication processes. But again, from a direct marketing perspective, so very important to understand that you do have good data. So I think that those things that might seem out of reach might be a couple of the first things that you might need to try before you start to run and utilize things like real-time data. When asked about the types of marketing services marketers would use or find the most value, analytics really topped the chart. So we can see here that coordination, analysis, and budget provide the primary impediments for marketing success. But marketers are largely focused on wanting to solve this by using analytical services, as well as using things that are going to connect the organization. So things such as coordinating with technology services and analytics is really a powerful way to empower the marketing process and drive synergy. And this is what we were saying here about the analytical services, right? So there's a great emphasis on when we ask marketers about what type of services they're focused on that drive value and have eradicated some of these challenges for them. It's analytics, right? So they're looking at the data, or they're utilizing services information or services partners really to directly look at the analytics and develop measurement and attribution models, potentially develop recommendation algorithms, and identify new audience trends. And so delivery services, deliverability, certainly within email marketing, is always valued. It's a necessary part, sort of the wheels on the bus, right, to get the messages delivered. But really here, more emphasis is placed on the analytics engine, strategy, and even creative, right? So there's a great opportunity here for marketers to partner, and as you can see here, marketers that have been doing that are finding the most value in those analytical acquisition sort of and creative services. Let's talk about some of the things that you can do, the actual tactics that you can utilize to put this organization in a more coordinated way to optimize and be ready for success. So what we're talking about here is a connected organization, right? So and really necessary for anybody that's practicing multi-channel marketing. So there's several pieces to it, so let's walk through them. The first is really integrated data, right? Access to data is paramount in becoming a successful multi-channel marketer. Again, it doesn't mean that data has to really be all in one physical data store, but it requires utilization of techniques that leverage open standards, so APIs, whether it's JSON, SOAP, REST, XML, but utilizing your technology partners to get access to that data and optimize programs around the utilization of that data. And unfortunately, most marketers, as we've seen, don't optimize their programs because they have a hard time getting at that data. So it's really important to have a technology partner that can easily get that data together. So analytical services, I'll go back and just hit that one again. And, analytical and attribution services are the means to bring together marketers from different channels. We've sort of seen that when we look at the siloed organization, and to collaborate with a service team to develop attribution models can be effective means to break down those walls between the business units and bring the channels together. Marketers are clamoring for an analytical services to build segments, predictive models. And often we have within the marketing department people that are great at strategy, creative, planning, even execution, but we're not finding a lot of organizations that have PhDs, data scientists within their resident organization. But certainly there are partners, even partners such as QuickPivot, that offer services organizations that can augment your internal team. So again, look for those types of partners that are going to be able to deliver that type of value. Building an attribution database, right? So looking at all the data that's coming in and building a cross-channel model. And there's many different ways to build attribution models, but that's also going to break down those organizational silos, because it's going to require a strategic investment in the tools and resources from all those stakeholders across the organizations that might have different goals. And it's not always an easy task, so look for vendors that can support an array of different business intelligence tools, and also those that have a unique perspective on multi-channel measurement. I think partnering here, particularly if you're a retailer, people that have specific vertical experience are likely going to be better equipped to help marketers leap the hurdles and drive towards analytics integration. The other part would be building this connected organization, right? So multi-channel marketing is empowered and optimized by a connected company that works together across these silos. So that bullet there on the left, or that bubble I should say, that's what's necessary to have the operating models, the standard processes, and the integration of people and the channels, the data, and even the service providers. So again, some ideas there. Attribution is a way to bring everybody together, but certainly things such as common goals, common measures of success, and again, potentially even incentives that everybody's sharing. So much more of a matrix sort of environment rather than a sort of single place. The other thing that I do want to point out here is that this is not something that you're going to do in a month. This is you've got to be familiar and comfortable with change, and that's just to wrap up here in a moment. One of the other things that we believe is so important. And that is to make sure that you have a framework in place that is necessary to really drive success. So the one constant obviously is always change, right? So you've got to be comfortable with this and become a master of organizational change. The connected company or organization is empowered and organized across departments and silos. So you need to optimize by moving to a collaborative organization that creates processes that are connected, but things where people are not threatened to really think out of the box or really approach new ideas. The other thing is testing, right? If testing is something that you do one-off, or it's a difficult thing because it's your present tools, for example, don't allow for it to be easy, you've got to make those changes, right? So you've got to institutionalize testing, because you've got to figure out what works and doesn't work. I mean, for marketers, it's all about that and automating that process, and that interactivity within that process is so very, very important. So particularly when you start to think about the emerging channels of social, potentially even video, but even just getting mobile right, testing out different templates and rendering implications that the mobile channel presents. Reconstruct and create new measures of success. Talked a lot about analytics, but this gets into that cross-channel connected new KPIs, right? So you're going to want to look at what is your advocacy rate, potentially could be on your email program. So what is the social influence of email subscribers? What is the social influence of people that get direct mail? Right. So new types of measures, again, that are going to make it possible to bring everybody together within the organization to discuss those things and implement them. And then obviously at the Relevancy Group, we firmly believe in relevance, and we've seen that from consumers. So when we ask people in the consumer survey, and I've been doing this research for a very long time, and the results really haven't changed. The top response of why people delete email is because it's not relevant to them. The second response, and that's about 60% of consumers say that, followed by about 50% of consumers that say it just comes too frequently. And then we say, well, what do you do when that happens? And they say, we just delete it. So, if your opt-out rate is low, don't be fooled that you're delivering relevant content, because when it's not relevant, the consumer's not even taking the time or investing the time to go through the unsubscribe process. It's just so easy now, particularly in the mobile world, just to swipe, and I'm just gonna triage my inbox. And so, utilizing all the things that we've discussed today, the data, all the analytics, certainly understanding how your content might display on different devices, and certainly testing are going to improve the relevance. And when you do that in a coordinated fashion across channels, again, we find that people that are doing that are doubling their revenue. So we'll tell you in a little bit about how to download the research, but certainly hope that you dig into the paper. There's a lot of great findings in there, and again, some really proven tactics that you can take back and utilize within your organization. Just want to tell you about the Relevancy Group and the Marketer Quarterly. So the Relevancy Group, we do research consulting. Obviously, we've talked a lot about the surveys, and we do assist marketers with vendor selection. We have a sister organization called the Marketer Quarterly. It's a free digital magazine where we feature a lot of our research and interview people, look at the day in the life of the CMO. So be sure to check that out. Really a lot of just great learnings in there for everybody. With that, I want to thank everybody for your attention today, and I'm going to turn it over to Paul Manderville. Paul?
Thanks, David. And I just wanted to say a couple of quick words about QuickPivot. QuickPivot is a software and a services company with a stubborn focus on three things simply. One, building great software. Two, untangling some of the complexities around customer data. And three, creating great customer experiences across channels. And again, we're committed to building great software because we want forward-thinking marketers, hopefully like the folks on the phone, to execute on their vision rather than compromise on it because they lack the tools. And again, our platform is fast, affordable, powerful, but we tried to keep it all easy to use without watering it down so you can still dig deep where you need to. But as David suggested, any software application is only as good as the data that you feed it, which is why QuickPivot also has a keen interest in data management and has the tools and know how to do it. And it doesn't matter whether your data is centralized or scattered, clean or dirty, big or small, customer keyed or completely anonymous. There's virtually no customer data challenge that you can throw at us that we can't solve, and our goal is to create a single view of the customer. And we have the tools and people and processes to do it. And then lastly, great software and a full view of the customer still isn't enough. Our tagline, marketing at customer speed, it tries to convey a commitment to working through the full customer experience as it unfolds in real time, and that means journey mapping and strategies to set it all in motion and to take advantage of those micro moments of success that happen on a customer's journey towards purchase and loyalty. And the end game for us is to help our clients get, keep, and grow more customer relationships. And again, thank you, David. I thought that was a great presentation.
Thank you, Paul. So as I mentioned, there's this fantastic research and beautifully laid out. Lots of great charts, graphics, but really most importantly, the information and the tactics that we talked about today, things that you can really utilize to guide your strategy in building your connected organization. You can download that research, the white paper at quickpivot.com/resources. You can hit that URL link here within the presentation to take you there. But don't leave us yet, because we're going to take questions here in just a moment. Alyssa?
Thank you, David and Paul. Really interesting stuff today. So we're going to go ahead and take some questions now, but just a reminder, if you do need to drop off, the presentation and associated materials are available in the resources folder at the bottom of your screen. So be sure to download and share all of the great materials and insights you learned here today with any friends or colleagues who might find it interesting. All right, so we'll open it up to Paul and David. I think one of the early slides spoke about channel coordination and managing customer contact frequency and how it still seems to be a challenge. How do you think organizations should tackle that issue?
I think 7 is the right number of messages. No. There, to figure out what that right number is I don't want to sound like a broken record, but testing, right? To figure out where that sweet spot is, and again, it's very specific to the type of retail or type of business, right? So there are some consumers or some types of businesses that have a high propensity for high frequency. So look, Publishers Clearinghouse, and they might sound like publisher, but really they're entertainment and they sell stuff. They're retail. They have a retail bit of their business. They're going to send those emails that are, take a spin and you're going to win some money or your discount, right? Their audience is really engaged with that type of messaging. So they can hit their list multiple times a day with very similar messages. That's not going to work for Neiman Marcus or perhaps a shoe retailer or something, where there might be more of a cadence that's appropriate to the life cycle. So to figure out what that right number is, and I think it involves testing. But Paul, I know you encounter this in the field with your clients a lot. Is there a perfect number or a recipe that you found that works?
No, and it is a question that we get a lot, and it's one of those interesting things where as soon as someone declares that they have the perfect number, it then becomes not the perfect number because everyone starts using that perfect number. So it really is something that you have to figure out for each brand at every single sort of moment of success, and be really disciplined again about how you test and learn. There's really no shortcut for it.
All right, great. Another question, I think this is targeted at David, but Paul, maybe you can chime in as well. You pointed out some proven tactics, but suggested that adoption of them remains low. Why do you think that is?
There's a couple of things. Certainly the research, our research has shown that's just people don't have enough resources or time. But it's also the next shiny thing, right? These diversions of well, I don't know what it might be this week, but Google is allowing me to map my audiences to them for display now, similar to what Facebook's been doing. So there's I think that's part of it, is just the diversion of it. But I think a lot of it comes down to resources, which I think, to Paul's point earlier about QuickPivot, you need a partner that has services where you can have that sort of volunteer fire department, or where you can offload at times of peak or just on an ongoing basis to have more hands in the process. I wonder your thoughts, Paul.
Yeah, I do think it's resources. I also think it's skill, right? There's a lot of great digital marketers out there. We need more of them. But I'm actually optimistic about this point. I think that the current generation of marketers that grew up digital, right, the folks that learned to swipe before they could type, we've got an interesting shift going on right now where that generation of marketers, they understand email, they understand the web, and they can apply a different level of skills to solve problems. And I think, as your slide said, maybe Act 1 of email's evolution was just generalized learning about how the world works, but I think Act 2 is going to be broad-scale adoption of best practices and just a more flexible approach of applying digital skills across the entire customer experience.
All right. Another great question. Do you have any ideas or recommendations for what to do about attribution, or how to allocate credit to multiple channels when they all play a part in driving behavior?
I'll take a stab at it, but there's a lot of different science, but most marketers are looking, at last click attribution, right? So this is the last known channel and then attributing it to that. It's not necessarily the best, or potentially some would argue it's not the best way to do it, but to me, it's one of the things that might be an easier approach, because that data is usually readily available and it doesn't require too much modeling or data science. But again, I'm not the data scientist, right? It's having somebody that has that skill set, to Paul's last point. And Paul, do you have different templates for people, or do you find that your retail clients, it's sort of more one size fits all. Is there a specific remedy, or is it customized to every individual client?
So it's interesting. There is no sort of template, and again, we are not the data scientists either. And what I'm hopeful about, again, in this space is that there's a lot of competing attribution technologies that are specialized in trying to provide an out-of-the-box solution. The challenge, especially for mid-market retail, is that those tools can be expensive on their own and tend to break the bank. One of the things that we've seen in the marketplace with some success is the adoption of just BI and visualization suites that are very affordable, things like MicroStrategy and Tableau, where sure, you can take that last-click attribution approach, right? It's easy, everybody gets it, everybody can do it, but you can then take your BI suite and paint a picture of what's happening pre-purchased and post-purchase without necessarily attributing value and making budgetary decisions. And at least for pennies on the dollar, you have an understanding of what channels do people interact with before they make a purchase and create a picture of that, and then what happens after purchase, and then start to draw your own conclusions. And again, with the skills and improvements that we're seeing in the next generation of marketers, a solution like that, leveraging off-the-shelf tools, seems reasonable and attainable.
Hello?
Yeah.
Hello?
Are there other questions, Alyssa?
Yeah, we have about 3 more questions in the queue. What is the most interesting thing I can do to get executive buy-in?
Show me the money, right? So it's so I think research like this helps, right? Because this is it's independent, it's based on facts, and so that those models work. You can say you can expect reasonably that kind of lift if you do the types of things that we're talking about in the paper. But I talked early on about knowing the value of your email subscribers, and there's actually on our site at the Relevancy group, there's a research where you can download a lot of stuff for free with registration, and there's an email value calculator that we built with the DMA some years ago and the Email Experience Council. So it was a sort of collaborative thing that we did with the industry. It's a spreadsheet. It's a serving suggestion of how you might go about figuring out the value of your subscribers. But you could also just say, well, I know it cost me whatever, $40 to acquire an email subscriber. If you know the cost of acquisition, whatever that might be for your individual business, they're at least worth that, right? So I think when you figure out those numbers, that's your currency to win potentially more budget dollars to do the types of things that Paul was mentioning with potentially attribution vendors, or just even getting more services and technology help. Because or modeling some of those things out in Tableau, right? That how would we get to the point of getting another 5% lift in our program, or reactivating maybe 5% of our audience? What do we need to get to do that, and then modeling that out from a revenue perspective to say, what would that look like from a revenue gain, and then look at, well, those tactics that we would have to utilize is let's drill into people's behavior, or for example, as a potential tactic to start to look at a reactivation program, perhaps. But I don't know, Paul, are there things that you suggest when you're working with your clients to say, hey, this is how you can get some more budget dollars, so you can become more sophisticated?
Yeah, I mean, I really have to echo your comments here. It is all about show me the money or show me the opportunity lost. And there's no, and again, in many mid-market brands, right, you're working with a fixed amount of resources, and everything has to be sort of cost justified on the heels of revenue upside. So there is no shortcut on that one either, unfortunately.
All right. So getting down into our last questions, one of our friends here today says, we have hundreds of templates. We know we need to be more mobile friendly. Do you think it's necessary to move a complete responsive design approach, or will mobile friendly suffice?
So this is sort of a controversial question, but I'll take a stab at it. And It'll be interesting to see for Paul if you agree with me or not. But
no, please do.
So we've looked at this. So the responsive design, which would mean if you've got hundreds of templates, you've got to redesign a responsive design for each one of those hundreds of templates in the style and guide of the potential things that might render, right? So now we're talking about perhaps 1,000 permeations, right? So we've worked with some clients that, or we've seen people, and I think there's some anecdotal research out there in the industry, not that we've done, but certainly in discussion boards and some of the resources like our own magazine have discussed this, where the lift hasn't been there from the effort that it takes to go completely responsive. It's really hard to get that return. Now, if you've got a few templates, which if you're a retailer is probably not so likely, you can experiment, obviously test it. But what we're finding is sort of the mobile-first approach is good enough, and actually works potentially even better, where you're constricting the content to where it's going to be a multi-part message, and it's going to render down to a certain width, so it's readable on an iPhone or Samsung or whatever. I'm not the design guru, but I forget what it is, 400 pixels or something like that. So that seems to be where the market's headed, because I think people that have invested in, again, the responsive thing haven't necessarily seen that return. But Paul, feel free to disagree with me, because it's one of those controversial areas that people say, oh no, you have to go all responsive.
Yeah, no, we see it all the time, right? And we see it in the form of the services request, where it is. It's those few dozen templates, and how much would it be to convert them all? And unfortunately, it's a time-consuming exercise, and I agree. I don't think the return is there. If you're literally sitting on hundreds of templates, I think the right approach, though, is to just kind of start over and come up with a handful of mobile-first design and add dynamic content, and then just rely on the fundamental design to flex where it needs to, rather than try and sort of retrofit a design on hundreds of templates.
Yep. Oh, good. We agree.
We do. We agree on something, David.
All right. I think we have time for one more question. This is directed at David. In your research, did you find that there was one data element that was more important than others in driving revenue and engagement?
Just thinking back to the model, we did, and that was that real-time data utilization seemed to be, when we break out that segment and look at all the things that we stacked into it in terms of those tactics, there seemed to be a bigger difference in sort of the performance of people that were using real-time data versus those that weren't. So again, and I mentioned it earlier, it might sound like rocket science, but it's often easier because that's the native event traffic that would be coming back into a system like QuickPivot, where you could then react to it, react in that moment on it, or certainly as a follow-up and a triggered or a life cycle sort of manner, even if it wasn't real-time reaction to the real-time data, if that makes any sense. But you're going to react to that real-time data in a couple hours, or utilize it in some sort of journey or life cycle across that customer's life cycle, to be redundant. So that was one that really, I think, sort of made a difference. And Paul, I know within your life cycle tool, which is I think really snazzy and easy to use, I mean, are you finding that with people that are triggering off of events and real-time data coming in, it's driving more sophistication, right? And it's sort of easier to do because that data is native to the platform, right?
Yeah, and again, without I think it's a big industry trend. I want to be careful about how much I sort of say, this is our. But if you read a lot of what Google's putting out right now in Google Think and this concept of micro moments of success, it is that in the moment responsiveness, whether you call it real time or not real time or close to real time, it almost doesn't matter. But when these time-starved consumers actually do something that represents engagement, it is that micro moment of success that you need to capitalize on. And I agree that a lot of the data is there, right? It's either there, as user agent information on their mobile device, and most systems will capture it natively, or it's there because they've clicked or opened or taken some activity on a web page, all of which is trackable. And I agree, the response that you get on those types of campaigns that are leveraging that type of behavior tend to move the dial much more than things that are more generically or calendar-driven timed, for sure.
Okay. Well, I think that brings us to the end of our journey, everyone. Thank you again for joining us. Remember to stay connected with us online. Be sure to grab those great resources in the folder below. And thanks for being part of this great webinar on the value of coordinated multi-channel marketing for mid-market retailers.
And I think I'm kicking it back to Alyssa, I hope, for Q&A. If we have any